Hey guys, I'm back. Today I'm making a video on giving puberty blockers to trans kids or kids with gender dysphoria. This is a pretty controversial topic. A lot of people claim it's child abuse and so. Probably done a lot of research on this, but we're also going to look at some research here. Going to base a lot on this study here, clinical management of gender dysphoria in children and adolescents, the Dutch approach, because it's from 1987 to 2011, so it's a good time. It has a lot of data, and they reference a lot of other studies. So that's a huge problem with people not really understanding how the treatment works. Like some people think that just because like a boy wants to play with girls, you're just gonna start pumping him full of like estrogen, which is pretty absurd. So I'm just gonna take the time here to read how the diagnosis works for children. In the Amsterdam Gender Identity Clinic, several sessions spread over a longer period of time are allotted to the pre-pubertal children below age of 12 for diagnosis. This is done to get insight into how the gender dysphoria develops over time. The children and the parents are seen at least once together. Each of the parents is interviewed individually, and the child is observed a number of times and subjected to an extensive psycho-diagnostic assessment. The procedure is concluded with an advisory consultation. One aim of the examination is to determine whether the criteria of a gender identity disorder diagnosis have been met. This can be rather simple with children demonstrating an extreme degree of gender dysphoria who are very explicit in their desire for gender reassignment. However, the clinical picture is not always that clear. Gender dysphoria is a dimensional phenomenon and can exist to a greater or larger degree. This is something being taken into greater account in the DSM-5. In addition, it can also manifest itself in various ways. One child with a strong gender dysphoric feeling may be very sensitive to his or her surroundings and only dares to come out at certain times and under certain circumstances. In another child, we can see very openly expressed gender dysphoria. In other cases, a child can show gender variant behavior without suffering from actual gender dysphoria. In those cases, the reasons for a referral usually lies more in the environment, uh, like the parents struggling with their child's behavior than in the child. All kinds of aspects of the children's functioning are subsequently evaluated, such as the cognitive level, psychosocial functioning, scholastic performance. For example, a boy may like playing with girls, not because he's unhappy at being a boy, but because he has difficulty joining in with other boys of his age due to limited cognitive faculties and immaturity. Any other possible psychopathology is dealt with extensively. If any is found, the possible relationship between a gender dysphoria and other diagnoses is investigated. In this way, for example, one can investigate whether an autistic boy's fascination for fancy dresses and long hair is more part of his autism or whether his autism reinforces certain aspects of his gender dysphoria. Some psychiatric diagnoses may be unrelated to the gender presentation, but still need attention, e.g., tic disorders. There are also problems or psychiatric disorders that can arise as a consequence of gender dysphoria, sort of anxiety, can't pronounce the word anyways, depression, oppositional defiant disorders. Furthermore, a good assessment of family functioning as well as the role of the child's gender variant behavior on family function is useful in order to gain a complete clinical picture. Also, where they've known gender dysphoria and gender identity disorder is pretty much the same thing. So if I had an argument with that in guy in comment section, it was a really stupid argument, but there you go. So it turns out they're not just pumping kids full of hormones the moment, you know, they wear a wig or something. But like, how do they treat them then? Well, thankfully, they write that as well here. The Dutch approach to clinical management of children with gender identity disorder contains elements of a therapeutic approach, but is not directed at the gender dysphoria itself. Instead, it focuses on its
concomitant
emotional and behavioral and family problems that may or may not have an impact on the child's gender dysphoria. In the section about parental guidance or counseling, this is a very important section because most gender dysphoric children will not remain gender dysphoric through adolescence. We recommend that young children not yet make a complete social transition, different clothing, a different given name, referring to boy as her instead of him, before the very early stage of puberty, that is adolescence. In making this recommendation, we aim to prevent youth with non-persisting gender dysphoria from having to make a complex change back to the role of the natal gender. So, the actual scientific view here seems to be complete opposite of what, well, let's be honest here, Republicans or anti-trans people think it is. I'm just going to paraphrase it here. But it goes on to say that after people reach the first stage of puberty, this gender dysphoric feeling doesn't really go away like it does from when you're a kid and you firstly enter puberty. And this is also here where the puberty suppression starts, and also where the social gender transition starts as well. Thankfully, they write a lot about the physical medical interventions, which is not surprising, and I'm going to read it aloud so there will be no misconceptions about this. Physical medical interventions can be divided into completely reversible interventions, puberty suppressors such as GnRHA, partially reversible interventions, cross-sex hormones, and completely irreversible gender reassignment surgery. Completely reversible interventions. Puberty suppression has two aims. First and foremost, to offer Adson time to smoothly explore his or her gender identity and to find out if a gender reassignment trajectory is really what the youth wants. Moreover, the knowledge that the bodies in this stage will not continue to develop in the undesired direction often results in a vast reduction of the distress they have been suffering from since the onset of puberty. Second, stopping the development of secondary sex characteristics makes passing in the desired gender role far easier than delaying treatment until adulthood. This entails advantages for functioning throughout one's life. This team's view that puberty suppression does not automatically have to lead to actual treatment, gender reassignment, is explicitly discussed with the youth and their parents. While with some adsons it is clear early on that there is only a very small chance they will abandon this trajectory, they still have to see their psychologist or psychiatrist regularly in the years they are on GnRHA or cross-sex hormones. Each adjunct is also regularly given consideration the weekly multidisciplinary conferences in which the pediatric endocrinologist also participates. As soon as necessary, extra help is deployed or the trajectory is adjusted. Youth with psychiatric or family problems can also become eligible for puberty suppression if the mental health treatment they receive is adequate enough to ensure that the diagnostic or treatment process is not unduly disturbed. To achieve this, good regular contact with their external therapist or counselor is necessary. Special attention is given to gender dysphoric instances with an autism spectrum disorder. It is certainly the case for them that the treatment has to be introduced calmly and each step must take place in close consultation with other mental health clinicians. Partial irreversible interventions. Gender dysphoric athletes are eligible for the first step of the actual gender reassignment when they have reached the age of 16. This age has been chosen because in the Netherlands, as well as many other countries, including America and like Norway, young people are then considered to be able to make independent medical decisions. While the parents do not have to approve, the Amsterdam Clinic prefers approval, as most adsons are still very much dependent on their caretakers. Furthermore, adsons have to meet the same criteria as the onset of puberty suppression, except for the Tanner stage criterion. Although most of the youths will have already made a social transition, this is now a requirement because sex characteristics of the desired gender will become visible to others. Cross-sex hormones will result in the start of puberty of the desired gender. Male to female or trans girls receive estrogens which result in breast growth and female fat distribution. Female to males or trans boys receive androgens and will become more muscular and develop a low voice and facial and body hair growth. Now for the completely irreversible interventions. When the adolescent has become of age at 18 and still meets all the eligibility criteria, he or she can be eligible for the last step of gender reassignment treatment trajectory to gender reassignment surgeries. Trans boys may undergo several operations. If they came out too late to the clinic and already had some breast development, mastectomy, hysterectomy, or ovarectomy, and if desired, genital operations. Trans girls usually undergo vaginoplasty and, if necessary, at their own financial expense, augmentation, mammoplasty. Trans girls who began puberty suppression at a young age often have insufficient penile skin for classical vaginoplasty and they need an adjusted surgical procedure using colon issue. So, looks like we got a pretty good system here. Not forcing, actually have really strict requirements. It's clearly seen here to be able to actually get on puberty suppression, start doing hormones, and of course, um, there are some unknown side effects. I know of puberty blockers. I know kind of it unknown effects on brain development. Some study I read a study which said was actually had no effect on it at all, and bone structure. But as the study here will conclude, Despite the understandable concern about potential harm that could be done by early physical medical interventions, it seems currently that withholding intervention is even more harmful for adolescents' well-being during adolescence and in adulthood. It is fortunate enough that nearly all diagnostic and treatment aspects, except for breast enlargement, are covered by insurance. Transgender individuals in the Netherlands do not need to suffer from incomplete or inadequate treatment because of financial problems. And if you watch from out of it, you can see that financial problems have a pretty big impact on thoughts of suicide and so. The William Institute's research, and also made a handy graph here, or like a flowchart. Okay, so as you can see, you go from kid, then most people stop having gender dysphoria. Some will persist, they'll get blockers and hormones when they're 16, surgery when they're 18, right? And watch from other vid for all the positive effects, really, that this treatment plan has. And this is also a pretty common one across the world. I think this is like the standard. So yeah, thanks for watching. And I think we need to top this video off with another study here. This is young adult psychological outcome after puberty suppression and gender reassignment. I'm going to link both the studies down in the description. Let's take a look at the results. After gender reassignment, the young adult with gender dysphoria was alleviated and psychological functioning has steadily improved. Well-being was similar to or better than same-age young adults from the general population. Improvements in psychological functioning were possibly correlated with post-surgical subjective well-being. So clearly it works. It's the I like how people love to do the same suicide rate before and after surgery, but that's just not true. I'm sorry. The other video they made is about this as well, but the conclusion is a clinical protocol of a multidisciplinary team of mental health professionals, physicians, and surgeons, including puberty suppression followed by cross-sex hormones and gender reassignment surgery, provides gender dysphoric youth who seek gender reassignment from early puberty on the opportunity to develop into well-functioning adults. That's a good note to end on.